Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by editor of the Wolfpacker.com and fellow co-host Matt Carter. A lot to talk about on today's episode. Probably some things we'd normally talk about would make the show, but because it is March and because there have been such big headlines for NC State men's and women's basketball over the past few days, we are going to focus on the women's team and then the men's team. Obviously, as everyone knows that's listening to this podcast, NC State lost an instant classic matchup against national powerhouse UConn in women's basketball in the Elite Eight in the Bridgeport Regional Final. Instant classic and double overtime. We'll break down our thoughts on that game and what to look forward to in the NC State women's program, what's to come. Also, Manny Bates entering the transfer portal. Not good news for Wolfpack fans, but we will talk about the impacts of that decision and maybe a little silver lining there. I'm sure one of us will have a take here, but that's going to be our second topic. Before we get into our first, quick reminders for the listeners and viewers at home. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're there. Plus, you can always watch us on our YouTube channel. And while you're there, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment while you're at it. Lastly, head over to thewolfpacker.com right now. Take advantage of the special deal the On3 Network has going on right now. For just $1, you can get a year's worth of premium subscription to the On3 Network, which includes all of the great work at thewolfpacker.com. So be sure to go ahead and take advantage of that deal now. Okay, Matt, let's talk about the women's tournament. Monday night was not good for my heart. I kept looking at my Apple Watch and seeing my heart rate climb as we got further and further into that game. An instant classic. That's first takeaway. Best game of both the men's and women's NCAA tournaments thus far. UConn comes out on top 91-87 in double overtime. I'd like to start by saying I'd like to walk back my take from a couple episodes ago.
I was waiting.
I texted Matt after the game, and I said, I was wrong, and I'll happily admit it on the next podcast. When the bracket was unveiled, we talked a little bit about the Bridgeport region, and I didn't want to hear the bracket path complaints. I didn't want to hear the NCAA's out to get NC State, because it just feels like it's constant. And I'm not poking fun at anybody that kind of follows those beliefs. I it's hard not to. It's just kind of exhausting when it just feels like your alma mater continuously gets beaten down by fate in collegiate postseason scenarios. But my take was, you know what? If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best, and it sucks that you're in Bridgeport, but you know what? I think this NC State team can go do it, and I didn't think that the home crowd would play as big of a factor. I will say that the home crowd, based on what I was able to see on TV, didn't look that electric. Didn't look like Bridgeport was some hostile environment like playing in Reynolds. Only problem was UConn fans outnumbered NC State fans. I think the broadcast said 83% to 17%. Now, there was a strong NC State section right behind the Wolfpack bench. They were passionate. They were standing up the whole time. They were engaged. It was a great women's college basketball environment. But, Matt, here's where my take went wrong. Because I think if the fans did not play a factor to the team. The Wolfpack was ready to go. You could tell their nerves were there in the first half. You could tell the moment was big for them in the first half. But once they got buckled in, settled in, second half on through overtime, they were poised. The fans were not anywhere near their comprehension of thought. The problem is that UConn got the home calls. And the officiating in that game was very inconsistent in my opinion. Of course, you can point to the Kayla Jones missed and one opportunity in which overtime was that? Was that the double overtime, Matt?
That was the first.
Single? Okay. Yep. Anyways, would have made a difference. She goes to the free throw line, makes that free throw. That shot by Jakia Brown-Turner from the corner to end overtime would have been a game winner rather than a game-tying shot. But you don't want to point to officiating. That's not what lost the game, but it was a factor. And in a game where, it was a 50-50 game. If you played this game on a truly neutral site, like let's say you played this game in Spokane, Washington, I think NC State finds a way to maybe win by 1 point, or maybe UConn wins by 1 point. But the game was just so competitive. It just stinks because NC State was the 1 seed, and they deserved, if anybody deserved any type of home crowd advantage, it was the Wolfpack. And I guess the only thing I could say about my original take that I would still believe is that it's not just an NC State thing. The women's tournament does have a history of making these decisions and punishing, or not punishing, but rewarding, lower seeds with a home court advantage based on bracket unveilings. This is not the first time the number 1 seed has been put in a tight spot against a lower seed in this type of scenario. So it's not just an NC State thing, but it doesn't make it any less wrong. And I hope it's something that the NCAA evaluates moving forward, and it's something that gets addressed, because it's not just NC State fans that think this is stupid. Look around Twitter. There's plenty of people out there that didn't have a dog in the fight that are out there asking, why is the 1 seed playing a road game? So there it is, Matt. I laid it all out there. I was wrong. I'll happily admit it. I'm not one of these guys that's going to, lean in if I've got a wrong take. You called it, Matt. You called it. You said, if this is a tight game and it goes down to the wire and that home court advantage was just the edge that pushed the Huskies over the edge, would you admit it? Would you walk your take back? And I didn't think I would, but here I am, Matt. And it sucks. And there it is. So just your thoughts.
There's a lot to unpack there, but just in terms of the elephant in the room. Look, do NC State fans sometimes get a rep for complaining? Yes, obviously. But sometimes it's okay to complain when something's really unfair, and I thought that was the case here. It was unfair. I said that beforehand. To your point, it is not an NC State thing, however. It was and something that Tim Peeler wrote about in his column. It was a women's basketball issue, and I think maybe there's an understanding that the powers to be that made these decisions about the selection, which was the chairperson of the committee, the AD at Duke, Nina King, was stuck in old school ways of thinking about the women's NCAA tournament. It's in a different place now. We got great ratings. The ratings for that game were awesome. NC State, Connecticut. They were awesome ratings for that game. People are watching more and more women's basketball. Ticket sales were strong in places that were just random sites, right? They were not necessarily hosting a nearby team. Now, they weren't sold out, packed to the brim like Bridgeport was, but it was still strong. And so it was an outdated way of thinking of it. Whomever was going to get put in Bridgeport was going to be put in an unfair situation. Probably some of this, what I listened to Nina King, and I don't want to blame Nina King because the chairperson is just a spokesperson, really. It's a collective group of people that made that decision. For all I know, Nina King could have been arguing her butt off trying to get Connecticut sent out of Bridgeport. If they talked about fairness to student athletes, the number one, there are 4 teams that deserve fairness above all others are the 4 number 1 seeds. And that's what the regular season is for. That's what the conference tournaments are for. The number 1 seeds have earned the right to have all the perks, all the benefits, all the advantages, everything. That's what they earned. That's what you play the regular season for, to set yourself up to be in the best possible position. And whomever was going to be the one seed in Bridgeport basically was told, yeah, nice regular season, but yeah, we're going to give a team that had a lesser regular season all the perks and advantages and benefits of being a one seed, even though they didn't have as good a season as you did. That's just a basically unfair, and it was a simple solution. If the S curve had Baylor as a 5 and Connecticut as a 6, switch them. They do that in the men's tournament all the time. They adjust teams up, seed lines, for matchup purposes, for location purposes, whatever. You can do that. Switch them. Put Connecticut at the 5 overall seed, send them at the number 2 seed to Wichita, and put them in the Louisville region, and put Baylor at the number 2 seed in Bridgeport, the number 6 seed overall. That is not. I heard Nina King say they didn't want to compromise the integrity of the process. That is not compromising anything. Called common freaking sense.
I mean, if anything, compromising the integrity of the tournament was having a 2 seed basically have a hosting a home game.
Yeah, and here's the reality: they made a business decision. We talked about that before. NC State benefited from that one. So, to your point, not a conspiracy against NC State. They benefited from that once. Just a few short years ago. I believe it was 2019. They were a 3 seed, maybe 4 seed, 3 seed, I believe. And they played a 2 seed in Greensboro, North Carolina. All right. Now, the reason why NC State was in Greensboro, it wasn't the S curve. It was an economical decision made that this NC State team would help sell tickets. Why do you think UNC, the 5 seed, was in Greensboro against South Carolina? If for whatever reason in your hometown of San Francisco was hosting a regional and defending national champion Stanford stumbled and slipped to a number 2 seed, you know where they would have gone? San Francisco.
Of course.
And look, there's some elements of their decisions that have to be made. They make them in the men's game, but they make them based on your seeding. They try to send the 1 and 2 seed to their best places, but the 1 seeds are taken care of. And I just think the women's tournament committee was stuck in their ways and outdated and not caught up on the modern realities of the game and created an unfair situation. And NC State was the ultimate unlucky group. And what I wrote about in my column, what hurts the most, this is a women's team core. Alyssa Kinane, Kai Crutchfield, Raina Perez, and Kayla Jones. They should be going down in NC State women's basketball history like Monty Towle, David Thompson, and Tommy Burleson on the men's side. This was the greatest women's basketball team in school history. You look at the Final Four, they've beaten Louisville 3 times in a row. They split with South Carolina the last 2 years. By the way, playing time they played South Carolina. Clearly can beat Connecticut. They were clearly as good as anybody in the country. They deserve to have Final Four written next to their name on the bios, leading NC State to a Final Four. And fate just hasn't been kind to them. 2020, it was a pandemic. Fine, whatever. Last year, one small weakness they had was short on depth, and Kayla Jones hurts her knee in the first round of the tournament. Jada Boyd gets in foul trouble against Indiana, and now all of a sudden you're in a tight spot. That happens. Injuries happen in basketball. Unlucky. But this was a basic human element level of unfairness that was cast upon them. I don't know if NC State wins on a neutral court. Paige Beckers is Paige Beckers. She's going to make shots. She makes shots, and there's not much you can do about it. She was the best player on the court. Tip your hat. Who to say she wouldn't have gone nuts in Richmond, Virginia, or Greenville, South Carolina, or Greensboro, North Carolina, wherever, right? So you can't say that cost them the game, but it sure as hell didn't make it a fair situation. And that's where I hope that those 4 women, particularly the 3, I mean, Perez transferred in. The other 3 have been here 4 to 5 years, and they deserved that legacy, and it just felt like fate kept intervening against them to prevent that from happening. And it's one thing to be a natural occurrence; it's another thing to be a group of people deciding to basically put something in your way, and that's really what kind of hurts the most about it. I thought the game was a phenomenal game. I don't have any beef with how things played out. I'm not going to complain about a call here, not a referee, but like a coaching decision here or a shot selection there. It took Paige Beckers to make 6 straight shots in a row and all her free throws for Connecticut to hang in there. If she misses one shot, the game changes. Sometimes you just got to say, you know what, there are only maybe 2 teams that could have played their best and beaten NC State at its best. And one of them was Connecticut on a home court. And that's what happened. To your point, I think the bigger issue I have with that missed call was that was their post player, and she would have fouled out on the play. And then instead, who to know? I don't know how the rest of overtime would have played out because of, you just don't know. But what could have happened is she should not have been available for the double overtime. And she was, and that changes things in the double overtime. I mean, they're down to one center at that point because it's extremely unfortunate that young woman hurt her wrist early in the game. And that would have left them down to one big who had 4 fouls herself, trying to guard Kunane in the double overtime. Totally changed the complexion of things. Totally changed the rebounding, which was a big factor in that game. So that part was missed. I'm not so sure there wasn't a 5-second violation on the last inbound pass by Connecticut that might have been missed. And that goes to your point. They're not going to call that thing in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But it was such a great effort. They put forth an effort that was Final Four worthy, but so did Connecticut. You just have to tip your hat to both teams. I watched, there's like a 9-minute highlight clip on YouTube I watched. It's incredible basketball.
Yeah, I mean, just definitely the best NC State game I've seen all year. No question. And again, I already said it. The men's and women's Final Four starts this weekend, but so far through the first 2 weekends, I think that one takes the claim of the best NCAA tournament game, men or women, thus far. I'm glad you brought it back to Paige Beckers because with all that said, with the unfortunate context of how the game played out, the deciding factor was Paige Beckers. She took over that game. She really just claimed her spot as the number 1 player in women's college basketball, and she did what star players do. I anticipate that she's going to go on and have more magical moments in the Final Four. I like UConn's odds as good as anybody out of anybody left, and you know what? Paige Beckers is probably going to be somebody that 5-10 years down the road, we're going to be talking about her like one of the WNBA greats. So stinks that you ran into them. Stinks that that team had a player like Paige Beckers. I thought, if you compare the rosters top to bottom, maybe NC State. I mean, I thought both of them played amongst their best games, and it showed you. What it showed you is that NC State is right there with UConn. Throw out the outcome of the game. Obviously, we wanted NC State to win. Obviously, we'd like to be celebrating NC State's accomplishments with this core group with the Final Four bid over a UConn team that has been to now 14 straight Final Fours. I mean, goodness, when I saw that stat pop up, I knew UConn has been dominant, but I didn't know that they've been to 14 straight Final Fours. That is incredible. And for your program to be on the national spotlight, going toe-to-toe, double overtime in Connecticut against that program, I know it's not the result we wanted, but man, was it a good look for the Wolfpack's program. And I feel like in the end, down the road, if we're looking at silver linings and looking towards the future, this game, the fact that it was NC State UConn and it was such a high-profile game, this will help the program moving forward with recruiting and image and just really national respect when it comes to future circumstances of seeding and in other types of decisions like that. So I thought State maybe left a little bit on the table defensively, particularly on the first half. If you want to go back and maybe critique where what went wrong, was it a perfect game by NC State offensively? In the second half and overtimes, it was darn close to it. First half, they missed so many bunnies. They missed so many bunnies. There were great looks. And defensively, the backdoor cuts were there for UConn basically all night. You'd love to have seen on the final possession of regulation, Diamond Johnson dribbles the ball for about 20 seconds at the top of the key. I think she starts her drive around 6 seconds, maybe 5. Would have liked to seen her get going a little sooner than that. I know NC State wanted to hold on for the last shot of possession. That means you either win or you go to overtime. That's what you want. But this isn't. You're not playing. Georgia Tech on a Wednesday night, and you can just create a bucket like that. They've got great athletes. They've got great defenders, and you got to tip your cap to UConn because they played great defense on that last possession and prevented a potential buzzer beater opportunity. But it stinks. And just looking towards the future, Matt, you've already talked about the core that's going to be leaving this group, but the thing we've talked about all season with this team, it's so deep in that, the second team of this roster would be good enough to compete in the ACC. What do you kind of see as the future of this program? Do you think, look, the transfer portal is a phenomenon in men's and women's basketball, so NC State's name is one on a list of select few that, the best transfers in the country. NC State's going to be one of those schools that they're probably considering. Got some nice pieces coming back. You got Diamond Johnson as probably your main star coming back. You got Jakia Brown-Turner coming back, Jada Boyd coming back. Of course, we'll see if there's any roster turnover in terms of departures, but I'd like to think NC State could pick up a girl or two in the transfer portal, have a good recruiting class coming in, and kind of pick up where they left off last year and make another case at being the best team in the ACC next season. Just quickly, Matt, your thoughts on the future of this program before we get to the men.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I would say that first off, you have to acknowledge that there's some teams in the ACC that are ascending. Notre Dame nearly beat NC State and could very well have all 5 starters back, depending on what happens with they're going to have 4 and could have all 5. Maya Dotson, their post player, is appealing for an extra year of eligibility, and I think they're confident she's going to get it. And certainly Olivia Miles, she's going to be one of the best guards in the country, one of the best players in the country, period. It took an incredible comeback for NC State to pull that out in the Sweet 16. I know NC State fans don't want to hear this, but UNC, basically all sophomores this year, and nearly took South Carolina to the limits and Greensboro in the Sweet 16. Yeah, they're headed in the right direction under their coach, a relatively new coach. Louisville's Louisville. Florida State just hired a new coach to see what happens there. Virginia Tech kind of they flamed out in the NCAA tournament, but I really felt like they were one of the best teams in the ACC. And they have the best player coming back in Elizabeth Kitley. So going to be hard to kind of maintain that level of ACC dominance. That was part of what makes this team so great. It was a damn good year of ACC women's basketball. Should have had 2 teams in the Final Four practically. They had 4 teams in the Sweet 16. I think 9 teams made the tournament. You know what NC State's record against all in that year of ACC basketball was? Once you count both tournaments? 21-1. And they beat every single team in the league at least once. That's dominating a great league. I think I heard Kelly Gramlett of the ACC Network say this was one of the best teams in ACC history. and it just didn't get. And that's what added to the frustration of how it got treated in terms of the draw. I mean, it wasn't just they were one seed; they were one of the best ACC teams ever, and got treated that way by the committee. Again, that goes back to the frustration of it. But I think the starting five for NC State's probably fine. Diamond Johnson, I really like Isaiah James, the freshman guard. She didn't get as much playing time because they were so deep and talented. She would have played a lot for a lot of other teams. Diamond Johnson would have started for 98% of other basketball teams. Jada Boyd would have started for 98% of other basketball teams. They move into the starting lineup. Still have Jakia Brown-Turner. Camille Hobby's very capable. They won't have the height. He won't be probably the All-American that Alyssa Kinane was, but every time Kinane was out with foul troubles or with COVID, it didn't seem like NC State, suffered as much as you might have expected, and there's a reason for that, and her name is Camille Hobby. So, they did kind of strike out. They aimed high on the recruiting trail and did kind of strike out. And their local girl picked Stanford, point guard, headed your way, Justin, picked Stanford.
Saw that. As someone that cut up the highlights from the McDonald's All-American game last night, it's okay. She didn't look that good in the McDonald's All-American game, so.
And I know there was a tall post player that's headed to Miami. I think that came down to NC State in Miami, that she was top 25 in the country. So you're right. I suspect, though, if you're in the transfer portal, NC State becomes a little bit of a destination, not only because of the success, but you're saying this is a high-profile top 5 program now, and they're losing 4 starters. So there's playing time available. So I think you probably see a couple. I think they should try to get somebody with a little bit of height to help out in the post depth. Maybe a shooting wing type, and then you have to kind of see what happens at the point guard position. You do have Genesis Bryant, played a little bit last year. She's going to come back. She, willing to play behind Diamond Johnson or with Diamond Johnson in the age of the portal. Those are the type of questions you have to ask now, right? Like we're about to talk about on the men's side. So, that'll play itself out. I just hope that Westmore and his fellow coaches can recover quickly enough. It's got to hope for them too. And, unlike the players, they can't really wind down too much because they got to jump into it and work on putting up the finishing touches. And they got to smile and put on a happy face to a potential transfer when deep down they probably would just rather be, sitting on their couch drinking a beer and wondering what could have been.
I wanted to transition to men's basketball right now, but you brought up something that I think we need to address. So last thing on the women's game. What do you think was said, or maybe this was revealed in the post-game press conference, between Gino Auriemma and Wes Moore at their meeting after the game? For those that aren't recalling the moment, it was kind of an awkward moment where Wes Moore and Gino are going to do their handshake, and Gino's like exacerbated. He's got his hands out. He's basically saying, "Hug me, brother." And Wes Moore, I mean, he didn't want to be around a single soul. I mean, it was like the soul had escaped his body, and he gave him a hug back. He was polite. He didn't go Juwan Howard on him. Although would have been understandable in that moment, possibly. I think they're friends, right?
They actually are really good friends.
So
and supposedly West said that Gino complimented NC State and said he wished that they didn't have to play. That he wished they were playing in the Final Four instead of the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, listening to Gino's post-game press conference, felt like it's a coach who was so emotional on 2 fronts. Emotional that his team pulled out that game, and emotionally sympathetic for NC State that they aren't in the Final Four. And he even stopped himself at one point. And I was wondering what he was going to say. Because he said something about maybe if. He said, well, doesn't matter. I was wondering if he was going to say maybe if this hadn't been in Bridgeport, or maybe if it had been a different location, it would have been a different. But he was genuinely empathetic for NC State. He knew that was a team that had put together an incredible performance. He said it was the best game he had ever coached at Connecticut, seen at Connecticut while coaching.
And he's seen a lot of basketball.
Yeah, and that he was.
He's been there since 1985.
Yeah. In fact, he seems to have he calls NC State, which is interesting. And I know, he was an assistant at Virginia for a long time before he took the Connecticut job under Debbie Ryan. And, so he knows him. He calls him State. That's how he's familiar with him. And talked about how Reynolds Coliseum was one of his favorite venues in the world. He really look. And then they joke, apparently they were joking at some point before or after the game how West said, they got the home and home with Connecticut. And West believed that game should have counted at the home game for Connecticut. So now they just got to play the game at Reynolds Coliseum. And said no, coach. He said no, West. You got to come to campus. But he was really looking forward to getting down to Reynolds Coliseum. And,
is that next season or the season after? Does the State go up to UConn first?
Yep. They go to UConn first, and then UConn will come down to NC State. So.
We'll circle that game. Circle that game on your schedule next year.
I think West was in the mood of I just lost my puppy. That when you lose your dog, you really just don't want to be around anybody. I don't think it was animosity towards Gino at all. Yeah, Gino was coming for the conciliatory hug, and right at that moment, West was, I think, still very much processing everything that had just happened. So.
Well, anyways, we will talk more about the women, I'm sure, some during the summer and definitely going into next season. So, what a season, what a year. Couldn't be prouder as an NC State alum of this group, the way they represent the university. And let's talk about the men. Manny Bates. Is he officially in the transfer portal, or has he simply announced it yet? Is the name Manny Bates in the portal?
Yes. No, okay. He's done.
Okay. I wasn't trying to get at anything there. I just he's gone. He's gone. I know that.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna toss this to you, Matt, because I've got my opinion on this. I'm curious to know yours first. However, Manny Bates entering the transfer portal. Everyone that listens to this podcast knows what we're talking about, but a quick recap. Obviously, missed the entire season last year, was supposed to be the star center for NC State last year, was supposed to, theoretically go to the NBA draft after this last season if he was going to be, an all-ACC type of player in the post. And, of course, he gets injured in the first game of the season, misses the entire year, is a full participant with the team, sits on the bench, goes to the practices, does the community outreach stuff, and then the season ends and Manny Bates officially announces that he is not going to the pros, which is what NC State fans were initially worried about, but rather is going to enter the transfer portal and go play college basketball somewhere else. So, Matt, your thoughts on the move for Manny and how this impacts NC State basketball going into next season?
Nothing good about it, that's for sure. When you talk about the impact on NC State, I mean you had your best case scenario and your worst case scenario, and this is a step towards the worst case scenario in terms of roster turnover. The first step towards it. I think some of the moves that have already happened are some of those that I have to put it bluntly could probably help both sides of the equation. Right, a player and program might be better off under their moves, but this is the first time where it's like this is the one that hurts the program. That it's trying to bounce back. If you're looking for a bounce back season next year, and on Manny, I think we'll learn a lot about Manny when he makes a decision about where he goes. If you see him ending up at like last summer, as all the rumors were Georgetown, right? Manny basically going to transfer to Georgetown. Well, if he ends up at Georgetown after the year they had at Georgetown, then it goes to show you that this was probably a business decision
Yeah,
as much as anything.
yeah.
If he turns up at a Kentucky, still may have been a business decision, but at least you can say it's the guy who was looking to go to somewhere high profile where he's more confident about how things shape up next year than maybe at NC State. And then that comes a little bit more understandable. So I think once we find out where Manny goes, um, that'll tell us a lot about why this decision happened.
So it's not good news for NC State fans. I'm not going to try to act like it's not. But my initial reaction to this, Matt, is not. I didn't hit the panic button. I mean, the panic button was hit a long time ago. But let's look at Manny Bates' track record at NC State. He's missed 2 seasons with injuries. He's had 1 strong season in the ACC. There was no guarantee that he comes back next season that he's going to be some all ACC performer, and that's assuming that he stays healthy all season. I mean, we had known that, maybe that shoulder during the summer was a little hurt. Try to give it a go. First game, he faces a little bit of physicality and immediately heads to the locker room. Who knows if there's permanent damage to that shoulder? I mean, I don't want to see that. I hope that's not the case. I hope he's got a good rehab and he's going to recover, and I hope the best for his future, because I really think he's a good dude. From every interaction we've had in press conferences, seems like just a stand-up human being. Was always passionate about NC State. You hate to see this decision, but at the same time, maybe it is a business decision. We don't know if there's some NIL deal out there that, could benefit his family. And, I mean, let's be honest. He's a traditional center that has injury problems, and that's no guarantee at an NBA future. Now, if, he stays healthy and he continues to improve on his offensive game and becomes a better rebounder and the shot blocking maintains, then, yeah, you could possibly see him going on to the NBA and having some sort of career. But there's no guarantees, and if there's any type of money on the table, maybe he's trying to go ahead and take that now while it's still there. But look, there's no guarantees that Manny Bates was gonna come back and be a great player for this NC State roster. The entire next season was going to rely on how Kevin Keatts does with bringing in talent from the transfer portal anyways. Like Manny Bates comes back, maybe Darion Sebron or Terquavion Smith comes back. One of those guys come back. That was kind of our best case scenario that we had been forecasting. If that happens and Kevin Keatts strikes out in the transfer portal again, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're still looking at a team that's on the bottom half of the ACC, most likely on the outside of the NCAA tournament looking in. So, yeah, I mean, you hate to see a fan favorite like this leave, and you hate to see how, if he was going to, in hindsight, you wish he had just transferred last season as opposed to this year. I mean, that's the only thing. It's like, be careful what you wish for, NC State fans, because remember when all those rumors were going on about Georgetown and, oh, this is going to be the end of the world, and then there was celebration when Manny Bates finally decides to come back to NC State. We don't know how the future is going to unplay, and had we known what was going to end up happening, well, NC State fans might have had a different perspective last year. They might have said, you know what? Go ahead and move on to Georgetown, and we'll go find somebody in the transfer portal, and maybe we can find some replacement big going into the season. But you didn't know that. Hindsight's 2020. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's very simple. The future of the Keatts program at NC State completely relies on his success in the transfer portal this offseason. It's a very, very crucial offseason for Kevin Keatts, and Wake Forest did it last year. There are programs that are built on building rosters just on a summer's worth of off seasons. Look at Baylor. They won the national championship last year. That team was comprised completely of transfers. So it's possible. And I'm not saying that there's not any hope out there. It's not the outcome that we wanted, but I could see this 6-12 months down the road, NC State fans being like, whatever.
If last year Iowa State was 2-21, made the Sweet 16 this year. Last year, Miami was 10-17. They were a good second half against uh, Kansas away from being in the Final Four. Last year, Wake Forest was 6-16. If they had scheduled better, probably in the NCAA tournament, and if the ACC would have gotten the respect it deserved, uh, not necessarily earned, but in hindsight deserved, they're probably in the NCAA tournament. So in today's college basketball world, you can make dramatic improvements from year to year. It can also dramatically go the other way for you, as we just found out at NC State. And we've seen elsewhere. Look at Duke, terrible last year. Look at Carolina, terrible 2 years ago. Look at Virginia, national title in 2019, NIT afterthought in 2022. There's no such thing as a program anymore in college basketball. Done. It's one of the problems this sport faces. It's zero continuity. But on the flip side of that, that does allow you to have dramatic turnarounds. You just got to hit it so well in the portal. No shortage of names. It's ridiculous, but there's no shortage of names. There are like 1,000 names now in the transfer portal. Got to go find your Alondas Williams and your Jake LaRivia and schedule smarter than Steve Forbes did at Wake Forest. But I think losing Manny Bates kind of further puts you a little bit back, a little bit firmer against the wall than it was before, or it would have been otherwise. But there's no reason to cry. I mean, my attitude is this. He's moving on, so you have to adjust. I mean, time spent moaning and complaining and being frustrated about everything is time wasted. So, got to move on. You can't. You got to hire 2 new assistant coaches, and you got to get to work in the portal, and there's got to be some urgency about it. Nobody can be sitting around complaining and being depressed. It doesn't do anybody any good. So you wish Manny the best and move on and find something. So
just a couple more thoughts on this. I've seen some knee-jerk Twitter reaction, coming out and acting as though this is Kevin Keats' fault. It's not like Kevin Keats was not trying to keep Manny Bates, and it's not like he's the only head coach in the country that's going to run into this issue in the summer, asking their star player, please return, please don't go to the transfer portal. And as great as those relationships can be, at the end of the day, the players now have the power to do what they want, and you can't control it. And to me, this is not a decision that's reflective of Kevin Keats. To my knowledge, and to every track record of history since Manny Bates has stepped on campus, they have had a great rapport, great relationship. It's probably nothing personal. Look at Walker Kessler last year, UNC. Hubert Davis steps in as the new head coach. He's begging Walker Kessler to come back to UNC, hoping that they can build around him as one of the top centers in the league. Walker Kessler goes to Auburn. UNC fans complained about that all the way through a couple weekends ago. And now they feel like they won the transfer portal trade because they got Brady Manick out of it, who has been spectacular in March and has been a big part of UNC's run to the Final Four right now. So, again, it's just the randomness of the after effects of what's happening here, to me, changes. It's not Kevin Keats' fault. Okay, that is my take. You can complain about other aspects of what you don't like, but a player deciding to move on, like name a head coach that you're like, okay, he's going to be able to keep everyone on his roster. There's no head coach in the country that is keeping everyone on their roster. Like, this is just a part of college basketball. And the second part of it, where I understand the complaints and I understand where NC State fans are at right now mentally, is this was just really, really, really bad timing for this news to come out. It was the morning after NC State loses, take your soul out of your body type of loss at UConn for a spot in the Final Four. Such a big game. There was already the frustration about where that game was being played. And then you combine that with the fact that both of your arch rivals, UNC and Duke, are about to meet in the Final Four, and that's all anybody wants to talk about, especially in the Triangle area, I can understand why the ant nest of NC State fans is riled up right now. And yes, it was bad timing on the Manny Bates end. But you know what? Let me leave you with some words of encouragement. I don't know who to credit for this one, and it's kind of a lame quote, but it's always darkest before the dawn, NC State fans. And we're approaching the end of our winter season. We have spring sports coming up. We'll see what the baseball team and all the other great spring programs are able to do. Then we're going to go into summer, and you know what comes after that, NC State fans? Football season. And there's going to be a lot of expectations going into this football season. But you know what? For all of the misfortunes, for missing the holiday, for football team having the Holiday Bowl canceled the same day against UCLA, for the baseball team to miss their opportunity to compete for a College World Series and possibly bring home a national title due to COVID in Omaha, and then for this, the recent case of the women's basketball team having to play an Elite Eight game on the road as the top seed in their region. Take all that into consideration. Would you trade all of that for an ACC football championship? It's certainly on the table this fall. And I'd like to think that there could be some sort of redemption story for the athletic program as a whole. I forget who. Was it Thayer Thomas that tweeted this out? Thayer Thomas tweeted out, eventually it's going to give. Right? Eventually it's going to give. And we're going to keep chopping. And we're going to keep grinding. The football team's taking note. And Matt just left Pro Day yesterday. Look, a lot of good things happen in that football program. A lot of good things happen in the women's basketball program. I think eventually the luck is going to go the other way for this program. And, maybe the football team can do something about it. But anyways, that is going to do it for this podcast. Matt Carter has silenced himself because there are people chattering in his background in his room. So I get the privilege of wrapping up this podcast for the loyal listeners and viewers at home. Look, I'm right there with you. I'm an NC State alum. I root for NC State. I'm not trying to pretend like I don't. I'm hurting with you, man. I'm hurting with you, and I'm speaking from the heart. So that's going to do it for this podcast, by the way. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Plus, you can always watch us on YouTube, where you should subscribe to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and drop a comment while you're at it. Also, head over to thewolfpacker.com, take advantage of the special deal the On3 Network has going on. For just $1, you can get a year's worth of premium subscription to the On3 Network, which includes all of the great work at thewolfpacker.com. Plus, you should follow us on social media. You can give us a follow at The Wolfpacker on Twitter. That's the main account. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will on Twitter, and give us a like on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on thewolfpacker.com. So for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and this has been the Wolfpacker Podcast.